a webinar of the Appalachian Cooperative Initiative focused on issues around rural broadband. And we're excited to have two experts who are working in their cooperative communities respectively here to talk about their experiences, because as we know, access to rural broadband is an issue that is so important to many of our communities, and we've seen just how important that is over the last year with the current public health context, but we've known that it's been an issue for many years, and we're excited to hear about the work that Mike and David have been doing to bring access to their communities. Before we jump into that conversation, I just want to share, if you're new to this webinar series, a little bit about the Appalachian Cooperative Initiative. So welcome, I'm Hannah. I'm the program manager of the Center for Cooperatives in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State. And we facilitate the Appalachian Cooperative Initiative, which really is a learning network that is meant to connect cooperative and community and business and economic developers, as well as advocates in Central Appalachia. And our goal is to contribute to the development of a thriving co-op ecosystem in our region. We want to raise awareness about the cooperative model. We want to equip practitioners with knowledge and skills that will help them recognize cooperative opportunities. And we want to facilitate a connected network of co-op partners. And all of this work has been made possible by partnerships with many institutions and organizations. And so we can't name them all, but we want to say thank you to them and to their continued collaboration. So partners like Todd Nesbitt at Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania, partners like the Appalachian Center for Economic Networks, the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, KCARD, who I see some folks on the call from, hello. Partners at West Virginia University Extension Service, and like I said, many others. So if you'd like to learn more about the initiative overall, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to get you engaged in cooperating. Just a little bit about our center. We support cooperative businesses across Ohio and West Virginia, as well as throughout the Mid-America region. We support entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting new cooperatives with technical assistance, and we provide training and education to existing cooperatives and to their employees and leaders through the Mid-America Cooperative Council. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to my colleague, Ryan Klein, who has been instrumental in conceptualizing and orchestrating and coordinating the conversation today that I'm really excited about. So Ryan, take it away. I'm going to stop my video and monitor the chat and Q&A. And like I said at the top, please feel free to add questions, comments, experiences in the chat and Q&A, and I'll be sure to get those to our panelists. Ryan?
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, and everyone. Welcome today. I'm excited to get to hear from our guests today about kind of their perspective on rural broadband and in Appalachia in particular. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Ryan Klein, and I am a cooperative development specialist at the Ohio State University Center for Cooperatives. And today we're hearing from two special guests, Mike Kaiser from BARC Electric Cooperative and David Brown from Southeast Broadband Cooperative. And we are excited to hear from them today. So I'll let both of our guests introduce themselves and give a little bit about their connection to broadband in Appalachia.
Who do you want to go first, Ryan?
Mike, you talked first. You're volunteer. It's voluntary.
All right. Well, a little bit about myself and BARC. I've been at BARC a little over 10 years now. BARC's a rural electric cooperative. We serve the southwest portion of western/southwest portion of Virginia up into the Appalachian Mountains into the West Virginia line. We've got 13,000 electric meters and now closing in on 3,000 active broadband subscribers as of today. We have purely fiber to the home system throughout our service territory, and we will have finished our entire project by the end of 2024. Every single electric member will have access to fiber. I would say we've put up probably close to 800 miles of fiber so far, and we've got another 1,000 or so to go before we're done. It's been a largely successful project, and people have, it's really changed people's lives in a lot of different ways, businesses and individuals who have had access to slow or no broadband, and now have access to, as good of internet as you get in any major city. So it's been a very successful, rewarding project to work on. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
So our story is a little bit different. Southeast Ohio Broadband Cooperative started, it was a year ago this month. It was a result of the pandemic. When people got sent home and kids were sent to homeschool, we realized just how many of our residents either didn't have access at all or had access that just wasn't capable of the things that needed to be done. So we formed our own cooperative with the intent of providing broadband service to Southeastern Ohio. Our network design is slightly different. We're using a hybrid, which is a combination of fixed wireless technologies. We're looking at some LTE technologies, and we're also working with some of the middle mile providers that have fiber already in the area to connect them to hopefully provide some fiber to the home, which is everybody's, of course, ultimate goal for broadband.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point there. We've had through the center, well, at least personally, I guess, we've had the opportunity to kind of learn more about broadband across the U.S. and really focused into Appalachia, and looking at kind of the landscape of broadband, a lot of the questions revolve around kind of what is the answer. Everyone knows that the issue exists there in spaces where people either don't have access or there's not an opportunity of a certain level of speed, as you mentioned, David. But there's, the answer is kind of what is left in kind of the murkiness. And so that kind of leads me to the first question I have for both of you is, why choose cooperation to solve these broadband issues? And in both of your cases, I know that's a little bit different, but I would just be curious if you what led you maybe initially to the idea of cooperation or co-op? Maybe David, in particular, David, I guess.
Yeah, David, you started from scratch, David. So why don't you answer that first?
We did. So the reason we decided to go with cooperative model was actually multifaceted here in Washington County. First, it's pretty evident that the population density is not here for one of the big carriers to come in and make it profitable quickly. So that kind of ruled out the possibility of doing a for-profit style business. We'd also had a couple of for-profit style efforts in the region that, we'll just say did not end well. So there was a bit of a headwind there in mistrust and, people that were generally leery of anybody coming in and trying an effort like this. So the visibility and the transparency of a cooperative, the dedication of a cooperative to the community rather than to making a profit, and that representation of the membership in the decision-making of the process, those were all elements that led us to adopting a cooperative model and building our own cooperative just for broadband.
I think that's a great insight into kind of, why choose cooperation. I'm curious if in your process, David, of putting together this initial cooperative, did you consider other options, with the groups of people, especially those in kind of need of services? Was there a moment that you kind of were like, we really like the transparency of a cooperative over maybe like, I'm thinking of other alternative uses, especially in Appalachia, that might be used like local municipality cooperation or, and and as you mentioned, you've had some service providers come in. So I'm curious, just, did you go through different phases of maybe, trying out different types of business models before you reached cooperatives?
We did. We looked at a few different business models. We looked at the municipal network model. Municipal networks, for a rather spread out area like Southeast Ohio, you would have to take it down to a township level to really be effective. We also thought about, the fact that cooperatives and cooperatives can work together. So, as a broadband cooperative, if, we're partnering up with an electric cooperative or a telephone cooperative, it's a lot easier to mesh those together than it is to take either a municipal or a for-profit company and try to work with others in the community that all have the same goal, make the community better, get a service out there that's not available now. It makes it a lot easier to integrate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point about that kind of cooperation among cooperatives, especially in Southern Ohio and Ohio in general, where we have a lot of rural electric cooperatives that exist. Those opportunities to kind of cooperate among are kind of increased. Now, Mike, you're in a little bit of a different situation here, being an existing electric cooperative. What led you to kind of include broadband in your services for your customers?
Well, it was the need. We had the same need that our customers had. So we have needs to communicate on our system with downline electric devices and with meters and with substations. And we are having the same communication issues our customers were. We could not get the bandwidth we needed to transmit to and from those electrical devices. So it was a no-brainer for us to get into the fiber business for our own needs. And I liken it to kind of like building a mall with an anchor tenant, like a Nordstrom's or a Macy's or something. You're building the mall and you've got your anchor tenant who's going to help fund the payback on that project right away, which is the electric cooperative. It's going to be the biggest user of the fiber network for its own needs. And the way we've set it up is we have a subsidiary that actually leases the fiber from our parent cooperative. And the parent is actually a broadband customer of the subsidiary. The subsidiary is actually the broadband operator, so to speak. They lease the fiber and operate it. So that's what led us to get into it, was our own needs, and then recognizing that if we're going to put this extra capacity on the lines and we're passing all of our customers, it's a no-brainer to drop off service connections to those customers too. And to David's point, we're all about service to the membership, and as long as we're recovering our cost of service, we don't have shareholders that have to have a return. We can live with a longer payback on this investment, just like we do on the electric side. And that's really what the secret sauce of some of the secret sauce of rural broadband is being able to live with those longer paybacks and not needing to turn an immediate 4-year, return on that capital investment. There's more to it than that, but that's a big piece of it. That's what makes it work. I've heard a lot of people say, if CenturyLink or Comcast or whoever can't do it, then there's a reason why they're not there. It's because it can't be done. And it's like, no, their business model is totally different than a cooperative business model. And it's not apples to apples making that comparison to any rural area and whether there can be a successful broadband project.
I think that's a great point too, that the initiatives and the kind of the motivations behind that look a lot different and kind of different business models.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm curious, Mike, if you kind of within your expansion or kind of adding on broadband, you mentioned, you guys are the ones who, you're in a rural area, clearly in Western Virginia. What, as you were kind of expanding, did you guys see increased kind of like a bit of mutually beneficial relationship? Like maybe you covered a certain area and once you added broadband, there were electric clients that kind of came on to the same, or was there that kind of shift, or did you just really see a shift towards, by being able to provide more broadband or, by being able to provide broadband, your own electrical clientele, increase, that kind of thing? Did you see anything? I
think it's still a little too early, Ryan, for that to materialize. If anything, what I think we've seen is probably some retention that otherwise we would have lost. One of the things we hear a lot is, people are looking to either move here or, and they say, well, I wouldn't have bought this house if I had known how bad the broadband access was, right? We used to hear that a lot. And lately now, what we've seen is fewer numbers of customers disconnecting and moving out. And I guess there's been a small uptick, and there's been a lot of inquiries of, I'm looking to buy this house, or it's a realtor saying, I've got a client who's interested. Is this eligible for fiber access or not? Because if it's not, they're not going to buy it, right? So we're getting a lot of those inquiries. Now what we haven't seen yet, and maybe it will come, is we haven't seen any big commercial development or sub housing developments pop up since we've done this, but it's early still. We're only 2-3 years into the project.
No, I think that you make a really good point about, especially I think it's an unknown kind of consequence of, not having access to fiber or having rural broadband access is that point of selling, whether that's real estate or anything like that. Having to get kind of access is one of those things now that's, required. So kind of on the same train of kind of, why choose cooperation? I think part of that kind of process for a lot of people, the daunting part at least, is getting started. Okay, what is this process to get broadband to your clients? So in particular, David, to start off, how did you connect with your community? Did you plan your efforts, create technology plans? How did that start for you? What did that process look like?
Well, the process actually went together pretty well. And I'll have to thank Hannah and the team at Ohio State, because they did help us in the beginning with putting together the cooperative and building that cooperative model. So that definitely speeded things up. Because we are in the middle of the pandemic, we couldn't do some of the traditional steps. So we actually formed an exploratory committee or exploratory group on Facebook. So within the first week that we had launched that group, we were over 600 people. We are now close to 2,000. And those are people mostly in Southeast Ohio that are just interested in getting service in their area. There's not been a single person who's not been supportive of the cooperative model. They all like the idea. And that's, kind of what drove us forward. The idea behind the exploratory is to gauge whether or not there's interest in the service. And we most certainly had interest very, very quickly. So we took, once we got the group together, then we did a mapping and a speed test study for the county so that we could determine where the most pressing need was. We reached out to multiple sources for funding. And I will say that has been our number one challenge, is how do you get the capital together to put something like this, especially when we're up against some of the trepidation we faced as we started out. Then we built from there, our prioritized plan. We brought in, we found an engineer who is a Buckeye, who was willing to move back to the area. And he came in and helped us with the network design, helped us to determine, what the wireless component needed to look like, where we should look at potentially connecting to the middle mile fiber. And that's how we launched it out.
Ryan, in our case, we did a feasibility study with a consultant, really focused more on the cost side. What is the cost to deploy this going to look like? And then for the revenue side, we did kind of two things. We did a randomized customer survey and gathered information on interest level, price points, that sort of thing. And then we did our own public awareness campaign called BARC If You Want Broadband that allowed people to express their interest in the project. And we use both of those data points to form the revenue side of the model. And then that just gave us the comfort level that yeah, there's enough interest out here to justify the investment in this. And then for financing, I agree with David. The biggest issue out of all of it is where do you get the capital to build? Because it's not, especially fiber to the home, is not inexpensive. For us, we're borrowing through USDA. That's who we borrow through for on the electric side. So we're just continuing that with the fiber expansion. It's interesting to hear David's story because it's his origin story right now is not unlike BARC's from the 1930s, really. Very, very similar.
Yeah, and I think that part is really interesting. We've talked with lots of rural electric folks and people who have either done research or lending, those kinds of things, and the kind of question or kind of push around broadband is getting the capital to do so, getting those funds, finding them, where will that be, what does that look like? And so I think that's not an unusual issue, I think, especially in this space. Mike, in particular, I was curious about, you said looking at the feasibility study and then moving forward, does that process come through like your board of directors to then be decided upon? Is this like a internal CEO decision where you're like, okay, what did that decision look like, I guess, when you were like, okay, now we're going to add broadband to our services?
It was a collective effort between management and the board. For an investment of this size, obviously it had to have board approval.
Mm-hmm.
But it was driven largely, the initial parts were driven largely by the management team, listening to what the membership wanted and what we needed as an electric utility, right? That's how it started. Mm-hmm. And then we presented the results of the feasibility study to the board. They asked questions, they wanted more research done, right? We actually tweaked it with a second consultant to just verify the assumptions that were in that model to make sure we were really reducing the amount of risk, as much risk as we could. And then ultimately, it was the board that voted to approve moving ahead with a pilot portion of the project. It's overall, it's going to be about a $70 to $80 million project for us. Wow. The pilot was 20 million, passed about 4,000 homes to start. And then the idea was, let's test the waters and see if it actually, it was a substation ring. So it connected up a bunch of our substations. Mm-hmm. And then, and it was very successful. We had plenty of interest, and the board said, yeah, let's go ahead and finish this project off.
I think that's always an interesting part, as well as kind of figuring out how, especially in cooperative spaces, kind of how those decisions are made and those kind of starting off points. A lot of wanting to move forward is with speed, and a lot of times there's that like kind of pilot phase that's important to take into consideration, how important those kind of understanding the success of that pilot to move forward. So we have a couple questions in the chat I wanted to get to. It's kind of related to our kind of process of how you got broadband and what that looked like. From Marissa in the chat, for David, she's wondering, how many members did you have before you actually were able to start providing services?
So technically we had 0 members before we started, and the subscribers became a member the day they were connected. We have, like I mentioned, almost 2,000 people involved in our exploratory group, and they eventually, hopefully, will become cooperative members.
Awesome. That's kind of where it starts, right? At 0. Some other people in our chat here, sorry, I'm scrolling through here, are thinking about kind of what does this look like implemented. So we go through this process, as you both mentioned, which are different, but in both of them kind of resulting in, providing services to your clients, to your members. What was that process like, whether it was pricing or deciding on how you were going to be able to, either affordably or think about your customers in your member owners in service fees, and what did that look like for either of you?
For us, we did do that study, so we got a sense of like what were customers willing to pay and what was too much. And so we came in. We really hoped to come in cheaper. We wanted to be the lowest cost product with better speeds than what's available today. So our initial entry level package is today, and it's been what it started out at. It's $60 a month for 50 down, 10 up, and that includes your wireless modem, your gateway device in the house.
Wow.
And I thought that since most people were going to be going from basically nothing to 50 meg service, that's probably what they would elect and they would be happy with that. And that's actually what the study showed. But since we've implemented it, interestingly, the top two speed tier packages for us are the 100 meg package and the 250 meg package. And the way we price those is it's an additional $10 a month. So it's $70 a month to double your speeds up to 100. And then it's another $10 a month up to $80 to double it again, basically to 250. And people are opting for that additional bandwidth. And what we've seen is they're usually cutting the cord on cable TV. They're opting for the higher speed and they're streaming their entertainment services. And they're saving money that way, obviously, right? Their combined entertainment, communication, or TV package and internet with us, if they're streaming, is much less expensive than a traditional cable package. So that's been a positive outcome of this project. Going into it thinking that we'd have a lot of people at the lower level speed tier, and finding out that majority actually want more bandwidth.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. For us, it was similar, but we had to do it grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
Being a startup, we didn't have the capital to go out and hire a consultant. And our board, by the way, are still volunteers. It's an unpaid board. So, it really is very much from the ground up. One of the keys there was the members of the board are just a great team with the right skill set. So Peggy Bailey is, she's one of the board members. She's a marketing and customer service expert. So she went out and she created a questionnaire or Google survey essentially, and polled the people, what are you paying now? What would you be interested in paying? And of course, did that all offline. Our money person is Jesse Headley, and Jesse's an MBA. So of course, he took the route of analyzing what other service providers are not only in the area, but in the state, in the region. What do they charge? What's the average? How do we hit, in the middle of that, with our focus being on customer service first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I'm a little jealous, Mike. We can't offer 250 meg yet, but when we do, I'm sure a lot of people are going to take us up on that. But we've had people that were just so happy to get connected with anything that 25 meg seems like just an incredible speed to them.
There's definitely, I've sensed this a lot, especially being in Washington and lobbying for rural broadband opportunities and funding. There's this belief that just something that's good enough is good enough for rural America. To just get them something, get them 10 meg service or whatever, and that's all they really need. And I think our project shows that that's not true, that the people in rural America want the same speeds that urban America gets, and they have the same, interest in that, and that they shouldn't be shortchanged, by substandard services, something that's just good enough.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and leads me to my kind of next thought. And it goes back to kind of, David, you said, born of this pandemic, or, started really during this pandemic. There's been a push to expand broadband into rural areas of the country. It was at sometimes there was a realization when schools decided, oh, maybe we need to go online, that a majority of rural schools didn't have that opportunity without either increased infrastructure, increased, input into their own Wi-Fi resources, and how to make those available to students. I'm wondering, what has being on the ground in the Appalachian region in this broadband space, how has it changed during this pandemic? Mike, in particular, you've had, a little bit more experience here, but I'm curious in both of your perspectives, have you seen more financial support that has kind of risen out of this pandemic? We hear of more funding being available. Have lobbying efforts, changed, Mike? What has changed, I guess, besides all of us sitting here on the computer, from broadband in your perspective?
Well, the demand drastically increased when COVID hit, and we really ramped up even to the max, honestly, with engineers, with construction crews, with materials to try and get to ramp up production and get the internet out there faster to customers that we could, and that still is happening today. There's tremendous amount of interest everywhere we go. The next group farther down the line is eagerly anticipating it. But I would say also that we've seen significant amount more financial resources come available. I mean, a lot of it is at the federal and state level. So in Virginia, we've had more state-funded grant opportunities. The legislature's opened up more grant dollars. Now those are competitive. They don't just give those out. You have to compete for those dollars, but there's been more state money, between 30 and 50 million a year at the state level now. And then, of course, at the federal level, especially FCC, we participated in CAF2 and in RDOF in those two auctions. Mm-hmm. And we're pretty successful in both, in getting some support to expand to census blocks that are unserved in our service territory.
Yeah, we've been faced with the challenge of being new.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, we started through the RDOF process, but our number one blocker there was we're just too new to qualify. So we are going to have to prove ourselves for a couple of years before we can get into that.
David, the irony in that is that if you're a big name with low Earth orbit satellites, you're not too new to get a whole bunch of money in RDOF. But if you're a startup cooperative, you're too new. That makes no sense.
I will leave your comment as it stands. Yes, I do agree. And I would also think that history should have played a fact, even some of the carriers that have been around for a long time, and some of those that took a lot of CAF money and didn't produce, but yet we're still able to participate in RDOF, and we're awarded areas in RDOF. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that's a machine that we're just not big enough to fight. So we're working with our state representatives, our county commissioners have been awesome in backing us and helping us to get this pulled together. The state level reps from our region have been really good. Even our local congressman has been, supportive of our efforts, because we're not trying to displace or replace. If somebody can come in tomorrow and put fiber in, we're going to be completely happy with that. But we've got to have something better than a 3 megabit DSL connection that works 30% of the time. So we're trying to get, something started immediately. And funding for a startup in this space is a little tough. Yeah. Funding for an unknown name is kind of tough, because, we're not somebody. We don't have a lobbyist in Columbus. We've got our county commissioners and our state representatives that are advocating for us, but it is a very difficult road.
I'm curious, just for our listeners, could we explain kind of what the RDOF is, maybe a little bit about that process, or what it kind of is working towards?
So RDOF is an FCC auction, and they essentially think of it like the Universal Service Fund for phone service. So all these carriers charge this tax on phone service, and it flows into a pot of money that the FCC administers. And what they did in a few years back, before before the Connect America Fund was formed is they said, everybody's got phones, so we don't need this money going to phone anymore. We're going to repurpose it for internet service. And we're going to figure out all the census blocks in America that are unserved by what they called broadband at the time. And that definition's gone up since then. Okay, to 25.3 is what they consider broadband now. And RDOF was an auction to basically get all unserved, 100%, what they deemed 100% unserved census blocks funding to build broadband. So carriers bid on these census blocks. And what you're bidding on is the right to build it and get the support money over a 10-year period to provide service. And whoever bid the least amount of support, whoever said they needed the least amount of financial support, won the auction for that census block. And what you're doing is you're committing to providing broadband service, and you're going to take this support to help offset your costs. That's what the first round of RDOF was about. Was that there's going to be another round in another year or two for what are called partially unserved census blocks. So they think they know which census blocks partially have service but also don't, and that pot of money now is going to be, I've been told, as big or bigger than the original first round of RDOF, and it'll be the same thing. You get pre-qualified like David talked about, and the chips are stacked against you if you don't have a history, because you think you have to show several years of audited financials or whatever, right? You have to show an operating history, and then but once you get qualified to bid into the auction, you're competing against anyone else for those census blocks, and whoever bids the lowest amount for that block I'm simplifying it, but they clear that block and get that money. That's how that works.
So it's kind of, or the way that I've at least always thought of it, and I could be wrong, was that kind of like a national auction of places that had never had broadband service provided to them before now.
Yes.
Any company in theory, but companies who have, an existing relationship or long-term have been established for an extended period or can prove that they can provide the services, kind of can come to the auction table.
Yeah, our crowdsource effort, our speed test, and documentation from that actually proved that what they refer to as the Form 477, which is the reporting data to the FCC from the carriers, is less than entirely accurate. There are some census blocks that were claimed as covered that simply don't have the service that they're supposed to right now.
So David, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to ask David, have you explored the Reconnect program through USDA, and are you eligible for that, or does that also require a history?
We are working on the Reconnect program and trying to get linked in with it as well.
Okay.
It's again, the history thing really did hurt us. I mean, it's just everybody wants 3 years of audited financials.
So this conversation has brought up a really good point that's in our chat that I wanted to get to a couple of those questions, Mike and David. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase. So if this doesn't answer the questions in the chat, please feel free to chat to me again, and I will try to get it. So thinking about federal and state funding and infrastructure packages, and the challenges that you're speaking about, and I'm sure there are many more, how is the co-op community engaging those efforts, and how is the co-op community ensuring that there is support for co-ops or other community-owned models in the developments that are happening at the federal and state level? And some of that, I think, goes to the organizations that somebody asked about, what types of organizations are involved in this process. So if you could just speak to your experiences there, I think that would help folks quite a bit. So I'm going to ask Mike to start, and then David, you can speak to your experience.
Well, I'm in a different situation than David, just because of the fact we have a long history of electric operations. So we've got that behind us already. I will say that 4 or 5 years ago, co-ops didn't have access to any FCC money. We were excluded, and a small group of electric co-ops, including BARC, lobbied heavily at the FCC and with NRECA's support, our National Trade Association, to gain access to that money. And, we were making the argument that we are the best hope for a lot of rural America because we have the poles in the wire and the right of way and the relationships, and we don't have the profit motive, like all the things that we just talked about, why it works for co-ops. And we gained access through those efforts, and that was largely driven by our trade association. I think today, a lot of the pots of money on the state and federal level co-ops have access to, and I say that, co-ops with a history. I mean, I think the issue here is who's lobbying for groups like David who don't have an operating history. You would think in the 1930s, electric co-ops didn't have any history, and they got loans from the federal government to start providing electric service. So you would think that a group like USDA would heed that message and provide that same type of funding for startup co-ops today. I don't know. But it seems like that's really the core of the question, is who's fighting for the new co-ops that are starting up to provide this service where there isn't an electric co-op, taking it up.
And there actually, there's some legislation going through Ohio state level right now that I will say that our two state reps down here, Jay Edwards, Don Jones, made absolutely certain that they included cooperatives as being eligible. So at the state broadband level, they're working towards helping cooperatives, both electric cooperatives and our broadband cooperative, to be eligible for that money. At the federal level, we haven't had that much success, but we're not going to stop trying, that's for sure.
Thank you both for that, for offering your perspective there. And on a related note, I think if we start looking at local and regional policy, and particularly economic development policies and agencies, we have an audience member wondering about how broadband, or I guess if broadband accessibility in your region is being used to promote economic development. And in particular, as we see movement in post-COVID away from urban areas into more rural areas. Could you speak, David, to what that's like in your community? And then Mike, we'll hear from your perspective.
I can give you a couple of really good examples. First, our local port authority is redeveloping a property for commercial access, and it's a former coal-fired power plant, and they're redeveloping the site to bring in some new industry. One of the challenges they had was the site did not have broadband access. So they came to us and said, can you come up with a way to get affordable broadband in here so that we can develop this site? We worked together, we came up with a design, we're going to be able to support them. And generally around the community, I've actually had a couple of people, one that called us up and said, look, if you can get internet to my house, I can get this job and work remotely that I would never have been able to get before. And to Mike's point earlier about broadband access, we actually did see a family sell their home and relocate specifically because they both had to work remotely and they did not have broadband access in that home.
Wow, those are powerful examples. Thanks for sharing that. Mike, in your experience in your region, what's that been like?
I know that the electric service and the broadband service are promoted through the local chambers of commerce and through the economic development agencies of the counties that we serve. But I personally have not witnessed any major initiatives that are focused on the broadband access yet. It's been mostly for us at the residential level, like the stories that David and I have told already, seeing those anecdotal impacts to individual residential consumers. I think it's coming. I think there's, we happen to have our service territory at the corner of two major interstates, and having fiber everywhere. I think it's only a matter of time before that type of an opportunity comes along for us. I just think it's been a little too new. We just haven't been in existence long enough to really attract that type of opportunity.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. And then another question that I think, David, you kind of spoke to this, but I want to make sure that we get it answered for this audience member. Thinking about how you moved relatively, well, you did very quickly in the establishment of your cooperative and in getting service to your community members. Could you talk a little bit about how you moved so quickly and why you decided to take that approach, I guess?
Quickly is a matter of perspective.
That's true. Very true.
It took us a year, almost a full year. It was 9 months before we brought our first clients online. Having the assistance of Ohio State made a big difference. They kind of gave us the roadmap for forming the cooperative, and having the community backing this effort. If it hadn't been for those people on the Facebook group that were saying, yes, we need this service. Yes, we will participate. So the need was a big driver that helped us get it done as quickly as we did. So I think, I'd like to have had it done 6 months ago, but, operating or building during a pandemic also slowed us down a little bit. So I'm glad somebody thinks we got it done quickly. Well,
I certainly
got a compliment.
I certainly think that it has been meeting a need for your community. And one thing that just from the outside looking in that has been something that we've noticed is you have a very dedicated group of volunteers who have donated a lot of their time and expertise. Yeah. And I'm sure that's not been a small part of what they've done over the last year. So that, I imagine, has been a big part of it as well.
Yeah, agreed.
And Mike, too, you talked about this is a significant rollout for your cooperative, and it is happening, as David said, fast is a relative term, but for that large of a rollout, that's fairly fast. I don't know if you would like to add anything from your perspective about how that's gone, or the approach that you've taken there.
Yeah, we've tried to take it in measured bites, so to speak. In the biggest challenge that we faced in our entire rollout is managing the customer expectations, to be honest with you. It feels like sometimes with broadband deployments, no good deed goes unpunished. And we learned the first time through the first phase, we learned not to sign people up too early. We were really excited to get the fiber out there and announce that we're coming forward with this fiber project, and we obviously wanted people to get signed up. But what we came to find out is if they wait too long between the time that they sign up and the time you connect them, they start getting angry at you. Even though no one else is bringing broadband to them, they don't understand why it's taking so long. So we learned our lesson that way, that it's best to hold off on any public announcements about new areas until closer to when construction is going to start. And we've also learned that you got to manage the messaging around how long it's going to take. We tell people often the electric system wasn't built overnight. It took almost 7 years or more to build out the electric system, and it's going to take several years for us to build out the fiber as well. So, and another piece to it, what we've tried to do is blend some of we can actually go outside of our service territory electrically with broadband. So we've gone into a couple of small towns that have high density, like the city of Lexington, to pick up a lot of consumers, commercial business, and some residential, and helps offset that line density to our electric territory that's much lower. Our average electric line density is 6.5 customers per line mile. You blend that in with some of the towns that we've built into with fiber, we're able to get our line density up to around 9 or 10, which just obviously helps the payback of the project and helps the economics of the overall endeavor. So that has helped too, but then we also have the issue of managing the messaging about why we're building into a non-BARC Electric area before BARC Electric customers have access to the broadband service. And we have to explain that it's all part of the business model. It's what these non-BARC customers are actually helping pay for the project to get to you. Otherwise, it wouldn't necessarily be economically feasible without that. So that's been our biggest challenge by far, has been the customer expectations aspect to it all.
Thank you both so much. And I'll just remind the attendees that if you have additional questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A in the chat, and I'll keep monitoring. But Ryan, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know there was some more you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, I think that those are all great points too, that tie back into kind of how co-ops can get started, can exist, can expand into filling these spaces. Those are a lot of questions with community members, are really, how do we do it? How can we do it, whether we have, no existing infrastructure, or we have, a electric co-op that's been here for, 30, 40 years. I think a lot of answers come from your guys' perspective. Knowing the group that kind of we have here through many ACI events, it's a lot of cooperative developers, people interested in starting cooperatives in spaces where they don't already exist, a lot of just Appalachian people passionate about economic justice and rejuvenation and community development. Because you guys are in the broadband space and you've been active in it and in kind of through cooperatives, what are, how can cooperative development folks, or people just interested in, cooperative and broadband development, better understand the efforts of, broadband through your experience? Is it supporting something? Is it, that community development piece? In your perspective, what can, us as a group, leaving here today, either do to know more about broadband or better support, broadband services?
Well, from my perspective, if you've got an electric co-op in your that serves your area, and they're not interested in broadband, or they haven't really started that kind of a project yet, the best thing you can do is start a grassroots movement to gather support and gather interest for it, right? I think the reluctance of electric co-ops to get into this, the ones that haven't, is this fear that it's not a monopoly electric business, and it's got too much risk, right? There's no guarantee that it's going to pay for itself. It's a competitive business. Maybe the CEO or the management or the board just doesn't want to take on that additional risk. But if it's something that's coming from the members, and if the co-op truly is about service to its members, that getting that message up to the board of directors and to the management of that co-op, that's the key. That's the key to getting your electric co-op engaged, is telling them that you want this, and showing them that there's enough people that support this to make it worthwhile. My feeling is we're just doing what the members have asked us to do as their electric cooperative. We're not doing this because we've got shareholders that want to make a return on this. So that would be my 2 cents, especially if you have an electric co-op in your area.
And I'll add a little bit to that. And if there's one message that I could get across or out, is broadband is not a luxury anymore. Broadband is a utility. And when most people think of broadband, they don't think of cooperatives. When they think of electric in rural areas, they absolutely think cooperative. In some cases, they think telephone. In some areas, they think of cooperatives. It's just as much a utility as electricity. And it needs to be viewed the same way. And we need the cooperative model to bring it to the rural areas. It's just, they're connected. It's worked in the past. It's currently working with other utilities. Why not use the same model for broadband?
I think that's a great kind of way to wrap up our webinar here, that the cooperative space is always expanding, and broadband is one of those territories where there's always room for growth. And I think both of you today have shown us ways that we can move and shape rural broadband and through cooperation. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for attending, and to thank our guests. And really encourage any questions, if you still have them, if they're burning, or if you just want to message Hannah and I privately, if it's more of a pointed question, or David and Mike privately, feel free to do so, kind of as we have a few minutes here. I know at least Hannah and I will be able to kind of just hang out in here if you have any last minute questions. Our kind of slide here is if you have any contact information for either Hannah or I, our information is here, or you have more questions about the Appalachia Cooperates Initiative, feel free to reach out about that or go visit our website or any of our social media to learn more about upcoming events or programming that we have planned throughout the rest of the year. So thanks again, Mike and David, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you, Ryan.